Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I really appreciated the Deputy Director General's comments this morning about the work that we all do as zoo educators and the role we have, especially even more importantly, as we move forward. We're at such an exciting point in our evolution as conservation organizations. We're making progress in understanding how to move people toward conservation action. What I'll be talking about today is how we're going to bring all these different things that we do together in a way that makes it possible to think of them as complementary and interacting together as a whole. One of our strategic initiatives at San Diego Zoo Global is to drive conservation action, with the added intent of contributing to a growing movement within our profession to increase the conservation value of our relationship with our audiences. Many of you are familiar with the customary dichotomy of the two main avenues for inspiring conservation action. One of these, environmental education, we're all really good at. The other, targeting behavioral change, is emerging as a new area of mission-advancing work where we're just beginning to develop our capabilities and our capacity. Let's start by looking at environmental education. And I'm not just talking about regular education programs. I'm talking about all the different ways that we implement learning experience. That includes our animal habitats, the shows that we create, keeper talks, social media, and so much more. We design these with the goal of increasing caring and understanding on those that participate. But what's great is we have our secret weapon, and that is our animals, the animals in our collection. Animal experiences are so powerful. They're tools that we use to evoke positive emotions, increase learning, and foster a stronger feeling of personal connection to wildlife. From research in zoos and aquariums, we know that all kinds of experience do result in people caring about and understanding wildlife better, and the role that they can play in conservation, and that really matters. People with a strong environmental ethic are much more likely to take action for conservation when the opportunity arises. And in general, they make more environmentally responsible decisions. And as kids, instead of squishing a beetle when they see it, they might actually name it. Or if they see a colony of ants, instead of walking all over them, maybe they'll study them for days. I know I spent a lot of time in ant holes when I was a kid. So, what environmental education doesn't do, though, is to move to people to do something specific, something that we would like them to do. The idea is if people know enough and care enough that they'll do the right thing, unfortunately, is a misconception. People are much more complicated than that. How many of you know that doing vigorous exercise is important for your good health? Raise your hand. Yes. And how many of you get regular, vigorous exercise? How many of you out there every day exercising? Raise your hand. Francis, of course, the person that runs marathons. But the rest of us, like poor pitiful me, do not get out there and exercise. You are an inspiration to me, Francis, but you're not getting me over my barriers of having to exercise. The other factors at play besides knowing what we should do. Environmental education is effective at motivating people to care about the wildlife and care about the environment. But whether or not they actually act on that motivation depends on so many other factors. To move people towards action, we need to get beyond traditional environmental education types of things that we do. We have to change the way we play our game. That's where social marketing comes in. Social marketing takes care of those other factors, and they put them into consideration beyond the knowing, beyond the caring, and applies to a variety of targeted, persuasive techniques to get people to do something specific. For example, planting a pollinator garden. It's a process that can be very effective at getting short-term results, but if it's important that people do something now, social marketing is the tools that we need to start using. Community-based social marketing is a type of social marketing that focuses on environmental sustainability. The community-based social marketing approach is to select a specific target audience and action. Identify ways to promote that action, that is, increase the motivation, and identify and address the barriers to taking that action. Those of you who aren't exercising as much as you think you should, why aren't you doing it? You don't have time. The kids are always saying, "Mommy, mommy, mommy," and there's a lot of excuses for not exercising. But those are called barriers. It takes research, it takes trial and error to identify and successfully address these motivating factors and what the actual barriers are for a particular conservation action. But if you invest the time and the effort, the process really does work. And I love this model. This model was created by conservation psychologist Wes Schultz, used for community-based social marketing of water and a dam, with the water representing the motivation, as you can see there on the left, and the dam representing the barriers, and the action represented by water spilling over the dam. To get people to actually do something, we need to raise the water level. That means we either need to motivate them, or we need to lower the dam. That means the barriers. We need to make it easier for them to actually take action, or create some kind of combination of motivation and social marketing. This isn't just true for community-based social marketing, it's true for any behavioral in general. Research shows that you usually need to do something 20 or 25 times for it to actually become a behavior. So we have a big challenge in front of us. It's a fundamental principle of behavioral psychology that what people do or don't do is a result of the interplay between the factors that promote a particular behavior, which is your motivation, and those that oppose it, the barriers. Environmental education works primarily on the motivation side of the equation, increasing the inherent motivation to actually help. While it isn't likely to get people to get toward immediate action, it does factor into the success of behavioral change campaigns. It's so much easier to get people to do something if they're already highly motivated. Think about exercise once again. If all those barriers to exercise were removed, you didn't have to work, you didn't have any children, you didn't have any external factors. If all those barriers were removed and became really convenient, wouldn't you want to do it because you know exercise is really important to your health? What if you knew it, but you didn't really care about your health? Knowing and caring do factor into this equation. Environmental education provides long-term benefits of creating environmental citizens, people who are much more likely under the right circumstances to take action. And community-based social marketing has the processes and it has the tools we need for setting up those circumstances. Community-based social marketing adds two things that build on environmental education-based increases for motivation. The first is also on the motivation side of the equation. It is to increase motivation through means other than increasing caring and understanding about conservation, and instead of having to do with basic psychology of why people do things, many of which are subconscious. And here are a few of the examples. One is social norm. If people think that other people are doing it, they're going to also be motivated to do it. One of the most famous experiments on this is with the bath towels in your hotel room. It's a classic experiment. On one and the most successful bath towel sign, it says, "Many of our guests say they would like to save energy and reuse their towels. If you would like to hang up your towel on that rack, you can help too." And that was much more significant in being successful than the note that said, "If you'd like to save energy and reuse your towel, hang it on the rack." Again, you want to join others that are making a difference. If people make a public pledge, they're much more likely to follow through on the action in order to remain consistent with their self-described sense of self. Positive messaging is also important. Encouraging behavior you want instead of criticizing or expressing your doubts or badgering or scolding. That just doesn't work. And you can provide relevant incentives too, like coupons, recognition. These are things that we haven't really in the past integrated into our conservation messaging or our conservation strategies, but they really fit in well with how we relate to our audiences. Everybody likes a bonus. Everybody likes something for free or something special. So this is what it looks like when you actually put these two together. Our environmental education program and social marketing. Environmental education increases motivation to do the right thing based on caring and knowledge, but that's not usually enough to actually get people over the barrier, get them to have action. Community-based social marketing adds to that motivation. It gets people closer to taking action. Sometimes that combination will be sufficient, but most of the time there are still barriers that are in people's way. Say you want people who feed the giraffe at your zoo to sign up for a citizen science program to help identify giraffes in photos taken in Africa. The visitors think it's a great idea, but then they're going to get home, they get busy, they can't remember what the program's name is even though they do a search on the website, and then they just give up. There are a lot of barriers there. That's the other new part of this equation that community-based social marketing brings to the table. It's going to help us lower those barriers. What might lowering the barriers look to signing up for that citizen science program look like? So the first of all, make it more top of mind, make it easier and fun. The part of community-based social marketing that comes less naturally to us is lowering those barriers. We don't have much practice of actually doing it. Why don't people do something that they know they should do? Do they just forget? Is it too hard? It's too inconvenient? They just don't have time. Here are some examples of ways to overcome those barriers and to help you facilitate action. First of all, bring that program on site. Make it visible to your guest. Second, provide prompts and email reminders to help keep things top of mind. I'm sure most of you have an email list. Use it and when you create these type of programs, include it. Information, how-to tools. Monterey Bay Aquarium for their Seafood Watch has an app. It's been downloaded 2 million times. Give people tools that are easy to get and that are practical. Create a website and put all the key information there and make it easy to find. Give them practical tools like web links and scripts for contacting legislators. Incorporate action into a fun activity when you actually have them with you. Zoos in Australia and New Zealand that collaborated on a sustainable palm oil campaign provided stamped postcards and email links for visitors to actually send their messages in support of clear labeling legislation. And tens of thousands of legislators received these tens of thousands of messages. So again, you need to look at and analyze what are the barriers that you're going to face when you're creating your campaign. So this, in a nutshell, is a united framework for conservation engagement. It's an integrated approach. Environmental education builds the underlying motivation, as we can see on the left. And the environmental ethic based on that understanding and caring for wildlife, that makes people much more inclined to want to take action. Social marketing techniques further increase that motivation. They help lower those barriers, and they help us to move people toward action. So here's another way you can think about it. How would you motivate people to protect wildlife? How do you, or could you, facilitate action? Thinking in terms of those two categories, and motivating and facilitating provides a strategic way for us to approach any one of our audience. You can see motivate, facilitate. When you combine them, you can actually drive people to action. And when people are talking about community-based social marketing, the language that you'll often hear is, you need to increase the benefits to help rise that motivation, and you need to lower the barriers. The great news for us is that we have regular visitors and we have members. And on average, they're much more knowledgeable and caring about wildlife and the environment than the general public. And that environmental ethic is even stronger in our members. When the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, USA, for example, they did a study and found that 28% of their visitors and 40% of their members were strongly connected to the zoo's conservation message. The other bit of great news is it turns out that they appreciate our guidance and they truly want our help and suggestions. Research has shown when we give visitors clear directions about what they need to do, using very positive messaging and social norms, and then especially when we provide them some sort of assistance to make it really easy, they rate their enjoyment of their visit at our sites, our zoos and aquariums, and they express greater admiration for us as conservation organizations. I don't know about you, but we have been working so hard at San Diego Zoo Global to turn ourselves from a zoological facility into a conservation organization. We started this work over 10 years ago, and when we started, we had zero recognition as a conservation organization. And after all the efforts we've made over the last 10 years, now 19% of the people in the United States recognize San Diego Zoo Global as a conservation organization. But we obviously still have a lot of heavy lifting to do. So let's talk about the tools in our toolkit that are going to help us be successful. And there's 6 of them. The first one is obviously our animal experiences. Let's look at the techniques we can use to motivate our audiences and facilitate action. This truly is, our animal experiences is our bread and butter. This is in reference to just the sensory experience, the seeing, the hearing, the smelling, and maybe even touching animals. Even without words, these can increase the feelings of connection that people have with animals and also increase their caring for animals and create a mental image or impression of what a species is truly like. And here you can see a couple experiences from the zoo in Cincinnati, Ohio in the United States. The second tool is learning experiences about wildlife. When combined with messaging, our stories, our ideas, and our information about wildlife and conservation, you begin to activate other dimensions of learning. That content can be delivered in many different formats, from narration for animal programs, to your graphics, your videos, live interpretation, your social media channels, and so much more. And here are a couple examples from the Philadelphia Zoo in Pennsylvania in the United States, including their animal training wall. You can see her doing a training session on tigers. The third tool is learning experiences about what people can actually do to make a difference. When you give specific tips about what you can do to help, you can plant that seed of an idea of going home and actually doing something positive for the environment. But you have to remember that people are very complicated and our lives are very complicated, so we're still in the motivating territory. On the left, you'll see a sign from the Brevard Zoo in Florida, and this is encouraging people to buy a license plate to help the wildlife of the area. And on the right, you will see from the Cincinnati Zoo, a sign about how people can make their yards more bird-friendly. Now we're getting a little bit more detailed here to get people to move them toward action. And this is positive engagement on grounds. You can increase your chance that people will actually do something using these social marketing techniques that tap into other types of motivators. Like we talked about social norms, public commitments, or incentives. We're still in the motivation territory, but with these techniques we can very much strengthen this motivation to the point where we're much likely to have success. So on the left, what you'll see is a kiosk from Monterey Aquarium. You select a pledge, they take a picture, and a video is created showing you fulfilling that pledge, and then they actually email you the pledge. And then they hope that through your social media channels that you will share with others what the pledge you took and hopefully convince them also to take that same pledge. And then at the right, you'll see the Wash Assured exhibit at Houston Zoo in Texas in the United States. Visitors can choose to take a pledge to use a reusable grocery bag to help save sea life. And then they'll get a picture taken with their pledge, as you can see that here I helped save sea turtles by visiting the Houston Zoo. And then they get their photo, and then they actually have a ink pad, and they can put their thumb in it and put their thumbprint on the wall, on the mural, to show that they are helping to save sea turtles. Tool 5, actually give them some assistance for their action, making it easier. That brings us to the essential next step, and this is what most of us miss when we have put together our campaigns. And that is taking the time and doing the research to figure out what are those barriers that are going to stop people from doing the conservation action you would like them to do. For example, if you want people to plant a pollinator-friendly garden, don't just leave them with the task of researching what plants they need to go out and buy in their region. If you look there on the left, the Cincinnati Zoo came up with an awesome program called Pollen Nation. And this is a little guide that tells them what plants that they can purchase and where they can buy them to help pollinators in their own backyard. But what's also awesome is that the zoo worked with growers and nurseries to find those suitable plants. And what they did was they put the zoo's logo on those plants so people would know that this is part of the Pollen Nation program. In another program, Zoos Victoria in Australia has a campaign to encourage people to keep their cats indoors. They discovered in their research that one of the biggest barriers was people thinking, oh, my cat is going to be so unhappy inside. It's going to be torture for him, my poor cat. So what they did was they actually created a website with a community board that people could post on the different ways that they gave their cats enrichment so they could keep them inside. And that just leads right into the relationships. We talked about that community board that Zoos Victoria actually created. That Safe Cat, Safe Wildlife program not only includes that community board with regular posts, but they are always posting new ideas. They make sure that area is kept up to date. That's a problem. A lot of what we do is we create these websites and they become stale because we don't keep that content up to date. They also post messages of encouragement and they thank people. And I know you just love these charts, but these are really important because it really talks and gives you the big picture on the theory of change. These engagement techniques combine in an endless variety of ways in the course of a visit and can deliberately be combined in programs and exhibitions and even across your whole organization. Each one can be expected to contribute to a conservation outcome in some specific way, with increasing conservation impact from the left to the right. Our members are really highly motivated. They come to us already caring and knowing a lot. And they are going to respond a lot more positively to action-related strategies at the right. And what we always share with people, if you're going to do a campaign, actually, your most motivated people are not your members, it's your employees. So before we try anything, we make sure we interview the employees, do a survey, figure out what the employees' barriers are, and we do a pilot with them first. And then the next phase of our rollout is with our members before we even consider going out to the general public. That outcome you should be targeting is with this audience. Give them information, tools, encouragement that they need to act on their already strong conservation ethic. So we're going to go back now and look at another example of what we have at the San Diego Zoo with our giraffe feeding and looking at inspiring experiences with wildlife and carrying on sensory input. Okay, now notice the top 3 lines are environmental education elements and the 3 below are community social-based marketing elements. So again, whenever you're putting your campaign together, make sure you put your plans together for both the environmental education side of your campaign and your social marketing side of your campaign. And here's another way to look at it, at the logical and chronological relationship among outcomes, showing a little bit more detailed. Each one of these tiers shows the progress that can be promoted through additional strategies, resulting in a cascade of outcomes with increasing conservation impact. This unified framework on what happens at the interface between an organization and an audience. But change at a much larger scale just doesn't happen from a lot of individuals acting on their own. The key is this: for long-term success is we need to look and re-engage groups of people. We need to engage communities and higher level players like industries and governments. The Seafood Watch app, which helps people select sustainable seafood, puts pressure on seafood providers, and that makes it possible for the aquarium to advocate successfully for changes up the supply chain. And I'll be talking about that a little bit more. Another example is the Taipei Zoo working with local farmers to establish wildlife-friendly farming practices, at the same time promoting purchasing their wildlife-friendly Taipei Zoo certified produce with the public. So here you have it. This is our united framework. It means thinking of our work to inspire conservation action, not as two different things, not as environmental education over here and a behavioral campaign over there, but linking them as a unified whole with parts that complement and build on each other. It gives us the ability to look in new directions for increasing our impact while still valuing and cultivating the good work we're already doing and the ways that we connect our audience with wildlife. And now what I'd like to do is go in just a little bit more detail with 5 different case studies of how different organizations are driving conservation behavioral change. And I'm going to start with San Diego Zoo, global. Our most successful program to date is called Wild Watch Kenya. Wild Watch Kenya enables citizen scientists to assist with research being done by our team on the reticulated giraffe in Kenya. Part of this research includes a network of 100 motion-activated trail cameras which automatically take pictures of animals as they walk by those cameras. Researchers then take out the memory cards from their camera, they check on their pictures to make sure they're taken properly, and they upload them to our Wild Watch Kenya website for review by our citizen scientists. These volunteers then study these camera photos to identify and count the animals in there, and if they see a giraffe, then they identify one of the 6 behaviors the giraffe is doing. So how did we get to success with this program? We use multiple channels in communication. We use regular organic social promotions. We celebrated World Giraffe Day at the San Diego Zoo in June, and we actually had a station there with iPads. Hundreds of people came up and we showed them how they could log into Wild Watch Kenya and how they could classify a photo. We touched people directly. We used Facebook, we used Instagram, Twitter. We have a live giraffe cam. We put messages there to say, join us in helping in giraffe conservation. We did a lot of great stories in our Zoo News magazine and other communication outlets. And then you need to have some other activities to keep people engaged. Believe it or not, at one point we had 1 million photos to classify. And what we did is we set up incentives for the 250,000 mark, the 500,000 mark, the 750,000 mark, and a big celebration at 1 million. And what is amazing to me is when I asked one of our graduate students to do this survey, I thought that over 95% of the people participating would be from the United States. But I was happily wrong. I cannot believe that 40% of the people that engage in giraffe conservation action are from overseas. They're from Australia, Canada, the UK, New Zealand, South Africa. And even more overwhelming to me is look at that pie chart on the right. 62% of the people that we've engaged have never been involved in any type of conservation action. So we're really taking and creating a new cadre of people that are going to help endangered wildlife. So what are our results? 16,000 volunteers and counting. People keep signing up. We have a global audience. And instead of taking 10 years to analyze all those giraffe photos, it took 2 years. And what's great now is the scientists have been able to look at all this data, and they figured out through this work that the giraffe distribution charts are incorrect for Kenya. They've updated it, they're publishing a paper on it. This has been so successful. Now we're looking at our own backyard to this endangered species in San Diego. This is the Wild Watch burrowing owl. So again, people are looking at these photos saying, is there a burrowing owl present, a different animal, and what type of behavior is that burrowing owl done? Because we wanted to connect with the people in San Diego, which we felt was so important. We hired a micro-influencer to help us. We have a brand new show on Animal Planet. We highlighted this program on that show, and we did a social media sweepstake. So what are our takeaways? Social media is such an important tool for you to help us move people to conservation action. In the end, Facebook and Instagram way outperform Twitter or any other social media channel. You got to use some creative tactics to keep people engaged, so that's why sweepstakes work. Make sure you get out there with really fascinating stories in all of your communication channels. And partnership is so important. Zooniverse is the platform we use. If you have these researchers out in the field, I really suggest you check out Universe and see if you can also put together a similar program in your country. We've partnered with them on email blasts, blogs, and we also make sure that we offer opportunities for our citizen scientists to meet with our researchers on Facebook Live and ask questions. So the next campaign is done by Zoos Victoria, and it's all about plastic. And I know we all know what everything that's happening with plastics around the world. But in this case, researchers found in the stomachs of flesh-footed shearwater chicks on Australia's Lord Howard Island that they had, in many cases, so much plastic in their guts that they became really weak, and a lot of them never even fledged. So what Zoos Victoria did was they did their homework. They decided that instead of, which we've talked about, instead of taking something away from people, that means taking the joy of balloons away, give them something just as fun. And in this case, it's bubbles. And in the best practice, they provided this positive alternative behavior rather than, as I said, take something away. They did focus groups with zoo visitors early on to identify the barriers and the benefits of using wildlife-friendly alternatives to balloons. Strategies to help remove these barriers and highlight the benefit were born into their program. And it was really awesome. I actually got to go to the Melbourne Zoo last week, and I actually got to see the implementation, and you can see these big signs. When they originally put these signs up, this is for people writing on a sticker originally that I commit that I'm going to use balloons, not bubbles. They just had stickers and then they cleaned them off every day, but they realized long term, especially that members would come back and they wanted to see their names on these signs, so they finally made them permanent. They actually sold bubbles with recipe cards, and I love this. This is the bubbleologist on the right, and they had him show up at different animal shows and different animal presentations. And the results are really astounding. When they did a post-visit behavioral change study, which they found after 8 months after visiting the seal show at the Melbourne Zoo, more than 2/3 of the visitors reported changing their behavior while attending or hosting an outdoor event as a result of their visit to the Melbourne Zoo. Overall, these results indicate that the program is achieving its social objectives of raising awareness about the negative impacts of balloon use and encouraging people to change their behavior. Palm oil. Zoos Victoria is advocating for clear labeling of palm oil and for manufacturers to use only 100% segregated and certified palm oil. At the Melbourne Zoo supermarket, visitors can actually scan real-life products and email manufacturers to keep up the pressure on their palm oil sourcing commitments. And they also have enabled people to write emails to their government ministers. And it isn't amazing? In just a couple years, 80,000 emails have been sent. That shows you what the power you can do when you use social marketing tools. Probably one of my all-time favorite programs is the Monterey Bay Aquarium Sustainable Seafood. I'm sure many of you heard this presentation many times, but it absolutely is astounding to me because Monterey Bay Aquarium was really a pioneer in this field. It's hard to believe it's been 20 years. And believe it or not, it just started with a temporary exhibit on fisheries practices and overfishing. And they had a panel in there about sustainable seafood, and one of their staff members said, you know what, we really need to do something. They wrote a grant, and the rest is history. Let's look at their amazing way that they did it. First of all, I'm always in favor of the old American expression, KISS. Keep it simple, stupid. Because people are really busy, they don't have time to read a lot. So what Monterey Bay did as their first step, they created those little seafood watch cards. I'm sure you've seen them even in your country. And they kept the categories really simple. Green fish, good to eat, go. Yellow, caution. Red, stop. So it's really easy to figure out which fish you can eat and which fish you can't eat. And their communications have been amazing. Look at this. 4 million website visits, over 60 million of these seafood guides handed out, 2 million apps downloaded, and over 1,000 events in 20 years. Social media has been a really important tool for them also. 80,000 people follow them on Twitter, 6,500 on Instagram. They've got almost 60,000 on Facebook, but in the 20 years, over 14 million people have reached out to Facebook. And here's what I love about this. This is what we talked about, the different levels of where you can start. You can start with your consumers. Consumers will then demand from the businesses that they visit that they want sustainable products. And then the businesses rely on the consumers. They go, the producers, and say, we need you to produce sustainable seafood. And at the same time, in this paradigm, they're also reaching out to governments to improve their regulations for fishing. And who would have thought of it 20 years ago, that now there are 13 organizations, a part of the Global Seafood Rating Alliance, and they're working together to align the assessment approaches of all member organizations to create global, consistent, individual methodology for what is the global standard for seafood sustainability to make sure it will work in each region and work with every culture. So when I talked to Karen, who's now in charge of this program, I said, what are her learnings? And she put this together. She said, zoos and aquariums, we are so fortunate because we're so uniquely positioned. We have so many people visit our properties. They trust us. And they're willing to act for us. We just have to give them the tools they need to make it easy to act through social marketing. And then we can all move that needle into the positive direction. This is a campaign that just started this year, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the problems with plastic straws. Can you believe in the US alone, 500 million straws are used every day? Every day. And there's estimate that there are 8.3 million straws on US beaches. So what this coalition of aquariums did, what I love this, and you can, as I go through each slide, you can see how the actions they ask more and more. So they start really easy. And they say, pledge to skip the straws you don't need. The next stage is ask your restaurant when you go there to only provide straws when someone wants a straw. So that's the second step. The third step is sign up for the 7-day plastic-free challenge. The next step is get the word out on Facebook. And then the last step is reach out to your community leaders. And what is incredible is 22 aquariums got together from 17 states and put this campaign together in record time. and it's making a difference. As you can see just online, on the master site, just think about it. They also have this on all of their sites, websites. They've already collected 152,000 pledges. So now the question, and Danny said, well, we need to know what International Zoo Educators, Deborah, is doing. How are they going to make a difference? How are you going to help us to move that needle in the positive direction? Okay, here's the first one. And this is Dr. Sarah Thomas. She's the lead author on the World Zoo and Aquarium Conservation Education Strategy. If you would like to review this, and we need some people from your region, we're desperate. If you would like to review this and give your feedback and comments, please contact Sarah. And this document is absolutely amazing. I've already read it through once. It has 6 different sessions, and yes, it hits that environmental education part, the knowledge, the understanding, the attitudes, the emotion, but it's also going to hit those behaviors, the actions and advocacy, that whole social part of it. So that's number 1. Here's the second thing that IZE is doing. Our journal for 2020, the theme is Learnings in Driving Conservation Behavioral Change. So do you have an effective strategy, tool, or program that develops empathy and fosters emotional connection or prompts behavioral change? Then you need to contact your regional rep. And there's Hero. Hero, raise your hand. There you go. You can also go to the IZE website and you get Leanne Wilson's email address and you can contact her, the editor. If you have a project you've been doing and you have results Taiwan, I love that program you're doing. We should include that in this journal. And the last thing we're doing, IZE is having our conference jointly with WAZA this year. It's October 15th, 11th through the 15th. I want to see lots of phones up there taking pictures of this because I want to see you there in San Diego. The theme is Driving Conservation Behavioral Change, and we're going to have 8 conference tracks. We would love for you to be there and to present. And now what I would like to do is kind of show you an overview of what we have in store in San Diego.
Institutions. There has never been a more crucial time to evaluate and further enhance our efforts and create a new vision for California, widely regarded as one of the most stunning and diverse accumulation of ecosystems in the world. And at the southernmost tip lies the picturesque county of San Diego, the most biodiverse place in the continental United States. The diverse regions of San Diego, honorably called home, are also a safe haven for the rare, threatened, and endangered. And with that honor comes great responsibility. Responsibility to conserve, to preserve, and to protect. With an impending change in climate being felt both literally all over the planet and figuratively through the shifting perception of our institutions, there has never been a more crucial time to evaluate and further enhance our efforts and create a new vision for change. Join San Diego Zoo Global in a dialogue about the future, heightening awareness of the need for sustainability, managing populations, researching nutritional needs, designing groundbreaking exhibits, taking veterinary care to the next level, maintaining financial viability, creating cutting-edge advances in science and technology, implementing trailblazing conservation research programs, both in-house and in the field, broadening our reach across the globe, offering innovative education efforts that inspire conservation behavioural change in our guests, and create the next generation of conservation leaders who will be elevating our facilities to places we could never have imagined. However, this conversation spans much farther than San Diego. It stretches well past California and to each corner of North America. This is something that reaches across all our continents, across land and sea. It affects us all. Join the World Association of Zoos and Aquariums along with the International Zoo Educators Association for the 75th Plaza Annual Conference. Celebrate our achievements. Be a part of the discussion. Help shape the future for all wildlife. California.
It truly takes a village to build a keynote presentation, and I need to recognize Emily Routman, Leanne Wilson from Zoos Victoria, Karen Stratton from Monterey Bay Aquarium, Sarah Thomas from the Auckland Zoo, and Jen Beaning from San Diego Zoo Global. And I want to leave you with one quote because I'm so proud by the actions that everybody in this room takes on a daily basis, and we're at such an exciting time because we can work together across the globe to drive real change. And this is a quote from Margaret Mead that is my favorite all-time quote. Never doubt that a small group, choked up being here with you. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. It is the only thing that ever has. Thank you.